Morning, buenos días. Hi, everyone. Welcome again to this, well, becoming traditional traveling data show. Just invented it, but I like the sound of it. Pretty much it's true because, we're doing this for the second or third time in READMAGINE. Next appointment will be in Frankfurt in October with the detailed data from all the surveys we did this year. And we do it also in other countries. I was just in Warsaw last week. I did a bit of a preview of the data as well. And the usual warning. If you've been there already, you know by now. The usual warning is do not trust anyone who talks about data about the book market, and that includes me. I have a vague idea, and usually it is corroborated by conversations with other experts in the field. Already, yesterday I was scrambling to see if data on the audiobook market corresponded with my assessment. They do, luckily. What we have here is a story about how the book market is going, has been going for the last 20 years and is going right now, that pretty much fits with the information we have available, which is not always complete, it's not always reliable, but we do what we can. So, just a couple of words about who we are, because sometimes I forget to say it and then it's not necessarily obvious. So I work for the Federation of European Publishers. We are an umbrella organization. Our members are the National Association of Publishers. We have 29 members in 28 countries from all over Europe. Plus, we have given our Ukrainian colleagues status of special guests to do a bit of a nice gesture for them after what's been happening in the last couple of years. We're based in Brussels, and we represent indirectly more than 6,000 publishers through our national associations. And the data I usually present come from surveys that we make from our members. So data come from the national associations. Then we take a look, we try to integrate with other sources, although it's not always easy. We try to make sure that there are not too many inconsistencies, but there will always be a few. You can also play a game of finding the inconsistencies and then letting me know. I'll be happy to talk about that. And this said, let's see the core data. We have our first assessment of how the markets went in 2023. Still have the detailed information from 2022. The update of the very detailed information will be given in Frankfurt, and then a quick view of how things are going this year. First of all, net publishers turnover. Obviously, that's the thing that everyone is wondering about. How did book sales go? Here we're talking net publishers turnover, so not market value at cover price. Market value at cover price, we estimate around 37-40 billion. Net turnover for 2023, we estimate something around 24.4 billion euro. Book publishing remains the largest cultural industry in Europe. It's always good to remember that, bear that in mind. It's not obvious to everyone. The good news is that turnover is basically back to the peak of 2007. You can see when turnover reached 24.5 billion euros. Then came the old, by now, financial crisis, which clearly had an impact. A few years of somehow stagnation. There might be other factors at play, apart from the crisis, that led to this period of more or less stagnation in the market. There had been a sign of recovery in 2019. Lucky, really lucky, then came COVID. COVID did not have a huge impact on turnover overall. By the end of the year, we estimated a loss of about 1%, but which hides many different situations behind. For example, different trade channels were impacted very differently. A lot of sales moved online. Some kinds of retailer were hit much harder than others. Also, smaller players in publishing had a harder time than the more established one. It was much more difficult for emerging authors to be found, whereas people tended to rely on trusted values, on authors they knew already. Children's books worked very well. We'll see a bit more of that later, because with children at home, parents wanted to give them something to do that was not being on a screen the whole day. Travel books almost disappeared from the market, again, obviously. But all in all, minus 1% in turnover, but with, again, very different situations, also geographically speaking, and also elements of fragility that we will see still have not been resolved to this day. An impressive rebound of turnover and sales right after. In 2021, we saw the biggest increase in turnover in a single year in more than 20 years. And then a couple of years of small increases, but as we will see, due mainly to the increase of prices because of inflation that we have been experiencing in the last couple of years rather than anything. And now, of course, the bad news. In my previous presentations, I didn't mention that, but now it's time to compensate. If anyone really thinks it's a thing to celebrate, that turnover is back to the level of 2007, let's remember that we're talking in nominal terms, not in real terms. So you have to take inflation out of the equation to know really the difference between now and 2007. So because I'm optimistic and I want to keep the mood high, I won't tell you how much inflation was. You can do the math, or maybe next year I'll add that information. For now, just bear in mind that the turnover is the same nominally. Take away inflation, and you see that it's not really time for a party. Title production, huge contribution of the publishing industry to cultural diversity in Europe. We're talking about almost 600,000 new titles per year. So as I always say, if someone says they don't know what to read, tell them that they just have to go and have a look, because there's plenty of choice. And obviously, we're not talking about 600,000 different novels, but all kinds of books in all European languages. We saw an increasing trend up until 4 or 5 years ago, where we passed the 600,000 titles mark. Then COVID did have a visible impact. Many projects had to be postponed or canceled. But now we are remaining at a level apparently a bit below the peak. It might be that there is a sort of rationalization, an attempt to do fewer titles but better in a way, or maybe there is selective pressure that's keeping somehow the number of titles a bit restrained. What we try to measure is first editions in print in all categories, but again, it's not always easy to distinguish. Unfortunately, we don't have enough data on copies sold for the time being to make a meaningful time series. I hope we might do in the future, but for now, we estimate that anyway, well, that was 2022, but this is more or less the general dimension. About 2.5 billion different books were sold, which is quite striking. Of course, we're 500 million people in Europe, so why not? But if you think 2.5 billion books sold in 1 year, that's quite amazing. My friend Piero estimated that maybe a bit cheating. If you stack them together, but not horizontally, but vertically, you pretty much reach the moon from the Earth. So a nice trip to the moon in books, which is quite a nice idea. Almost 14 million different titles are available for sale in bookstores in Europe. Again, there is a lot to read for a few thousand million lifetimes. of which more than 3 million are available in digital and audio growing a lot. This is the breakdown by macro categories. We have educational school books, which, well, the cycle there depends really more on national education policies more than anything. Academic and professional, trade, which is usually around half of the value of the market. And what I find particularly interesting is the resilience of children's books, which actually, as I said, benefited in share from COVID and represent currently about 15% of the market. As I said, this kind of detailed information we managed to update for Frankfurt, but more or less you see the trend. And quite interestingly, although obviously not surprisingly at all, we see when looking at sales by trade channels, sales in bookstores, which used to be about half of turnover for publishers, went down to a bit less than 45% in 2020, obviously again because bookstores were closed. And on the other hand, online sales from 23 to almost 29%. Again, no surprises here. 2021, the trend remained more or less the same. By 2022, we were seeing what seemed to be a return to physical bookstores by people with sales in bookstore going back again above 45%, and online sales coming down from 29 to a bit less than 26%. The trend seems to be confirmed to some extent for 2023, but as we will see, sales in bookstores have not gone back to the pre-pandemic level, and that is one of the elements of fragility that that COVID introduced, which I was talking about. Format. Print books remain by far the largest source of income for publishers. Again, I hope that it's not a surprise for people who are experts of the field. 84%, give or take, is the share of print. Again, huge differences. There are segments that are almost completely digital in sales, and others that are almost completely print in sales, and everything in between. Digital ebooks close to 13%. Audiobooks growing a lot. I mean, 3.2% doesn't look like that much, but it was 2.5% in 2021. 3.2%, that's a huge increase year on year. This is only 2022, 2023 will be even more. And as Rudiger will point out afterwards, and he always says, the digital share and the audio share very likely is largely underestimated, because paradoxically it's more difficult to capture sales in digital than in print. Not least because it's very difficult to assess, with the fact that digital and especially audio goes mainly through subscription models, it becomes very difficult to assess what the actual turnover is when audiobooks are somehow in your telco subscription, in your Spotify subscription, whatever. So a share that is increasing and most likely pretty much, very much underestimated. Interesting additional bonus piece of information. Eurostat, the European Union Statistical Office, just published the results of a survey. This relates to online purchases of books, magazines, of newspaper, physical and digital in the EU. The question is a bit weird because they asked if you had bought one of these things online in the last 3 months. And that was done last year. So the way to read it is, well, in blue, online purchases of print, books, magazines, and newspapers, which I expect to be mainly books, because I don't know who buys a print newspaper online. And in yellow, online purchases of digital books, magazines, and newspapers, and there's more of a mix. So it means that roughly 14% of people bought in the last 3 months a print publication online, and roughly 7% of people bought a digital publication online. And well, on the one hand, you see that print remains also in this field the type of publication that gets the majority of sales, but there are countries where by now, Nordics, Denmark here, Finland there, but also the Netherlands, almost, where the digital share is very, very high, in some cases higher than the share of print sales. And we will see this helps as an introduction to see that there are places like the Nordics where all the growth that we've seen in the last few years comes from digital. Now, another new entry in my presentation and source of, well, I think, interesting reflections. This is the level of prices. So how harmonized index of consumer prices, inflation, let's say for simplicity, in the last 20 years, and the average book price in the last 20 years. Again, source is Eurostat. So if we set 20 years ago, in 2003, well, 21 by now, at 100, the level of those two variables back then, by 2023, general inflation has been 60%. So prices, all in all, grew 60% in the last 20 years. Book prices grew a little less than 35%. Even in a year of strong inflation like 2023, the general level of prices increased more than 6%. Book prices, on average, increased just, well, 4%. Is that a good thing? Because it allows us to say books, all in all, are really not too expensive? Or is it yet another sign of weakness because book prices cannot even keep up with inflation? This is up for discussion. But the facts are that, and again, publishers and booksellers will have experienced it, book prices do not keep up with inflation. The first time we presented this, one bookseller stood up and said, yeah, publishers are keeping books too cheap. That's bad. Again, up for discussion. And now, one of my favorite parts, the maps, as those who have seen the show already know, and also the delight of all the colorblind people in the room. Sorry, I'm fixated with the reds and greens. So I promise these are, well, pink and green in this case, but this is how the markets went in 2023. In most cases, information refers to the trade part of sales because those are more readily available. To know also sales of education, academic, usually it takes a bit longer. So in the majority of cases, we're talking about sales in trade, but we've seen that it's more than half of the market. And as I said, well, we estimate plus 2.3%, but again, in most cases, it's because value went marginally up, volume, so number of books sold, down, and the increase has to do with the increase of prices, again, below inflation, but enough to at least nominally make for a slightly higher turnover. And you see nothing spectacular either way. Nordics a bit weaker for last year, but they have been growing a lot, including during the pandemic. The rest of the main markets more or less holding. Interestingly, it's very nice we start making inroads beyond the data Iron Curtain, because usually there's a clear difference between Eastern and Western Europe in terms of availability of data. For once, we have a bit of information with Slovenia, Hungary, Romania, and I hope to be able to keep expanding the color part of the map, also with the help of our members and everyone who wants to contribute. So this is the total turnover for last year. This is the same, but for print. books only. We see that pretty much print books go with the market, or the other way around. The market overall goes with print books because of the share of print. We already notice a difference in the Nordics, where the share of print, not the share, but with the value of print sales is going down quite more markedly. Sales in bookshops, as I said, picking up. In some cases, like in the UK, quite significantly, but more or less everywhere. Again, except in the Nordics. Again, why? Because there, all the growth is in digital. Other side of the coin, sales, online sales of print books going down in most cases, not in all cases. Until last year, you would have seen pretty much every country between pink and red. Now, in some territories, sales online are growing again a bit, but all in all, the people seem to be returning to physical bookstores. Then obviously you have to compare with the last normal year, 2019, and I don't know for how many years we'll be doing this. For the time being, we're doing it. So turnover higher than in 2019, much higher in many cases. Spain, Italy, but also France, Portugal. Well, Portugal was, even though Portugal was hit very hard by COVID, the Nordics. Germany and Austria, to an extent, stick out a bit. Germany was the last country to return to the pre-pandemic level of turnover, again, without counting inflation, because the uncertainty, the geopolitical uncertainty made the Germans nervous, and when Germans are nervous, they save even more than usual, so that Germany was still in pink until 2022. Print sales, same story, done pretty well, but again, in the Nordics. But here, I also want to point out at how much audiobook sales have grown in just 4 years. We're talking about 240% in Finland, 210, 11% in Italy, more than 100% in the UK. So this is what's happening in the audiobook market for the time being. Now, we all know that you don't sustain double, triple-digit growth for many years in a row. But for the time being, this is what's going on. Again, the bad news because we, as publishers, rely on a good, healthy, rich, diverse network of independent booksellers to thrive. Sales in bookstores, according to information that our members send us, in most cases have not returned to the pre-pandemic level, and that's not good news. And obviously, online sales are still much, much higher than before COVID. You also see that the more granular information becomes, the fewer countries are able to provide this kind of information. And then a quick glimpse at what's going on so far this year. We have information up until March or April, and pretty much is more of the same, mixed picture, a little growth or a little decrease. Where there is growth, it's again more because of the price dynamic than anything. Volumes seem to be going down. Now, we also all know that until the holidays, summer holidays, and most of all the Christmas holiday, we won't really know how the year is going. So first 3 months mean something, but are by far not the most meaningful period to measure sales. But we have a bit of an idea. Finland, it might seem an oddity, there basically it's very specific it's the growth in sales of digital databases, they told us, that have somehow exploded in the first month of the year. Otherwise, the trend would be similar to that of Sweden. And with that, I'm done for this time as well. As I always say, take it as a way rather to stimulate discussion, see if it fits with your country, it fits with the idea you had about the market. And well, if you like it, keep following the show. We'll be in Frankfurt in October. We'll be, I hope, next year here and in many other places. And well, let's keep talking about data because it's something I love and it's something essential to have an idea of what's happening in our sector. And thank you very much for your attention.